Time now for a brief look at some of the latest business news, and for that we're joined here on set by Brian Quinn from our business desk. And Brian, we're starting with a big boost for Britain's maritime defence industry as Australia puts in a rather big order.
That's right. British defence giant BAE Systems has won a huge contract to build new warships for the Australian government. Well, the deal worth nearly £20 billion for 9 anti-submarine frigates. The actual construction will take place in Australia beginning in 2020. The program expected to create some 5,000 jobs over the next 3 decades. The UK Prime Minister Theresa May called the deal an enormous boost for the British economy. She's been working to build trade ties with allies as Britain prepares to exit the EU. Australia's Prime Minister hinted at that relationship when he announced the deal. Here he is.
The UK is one of our closest friends, allies, partners, family in every respect. And I was very pleased to discuss our decision with Theresa May last night, in fact. So yes, that's a very important part of the decision.
Well, next, the late-night deal between European leaders on EU migration policy has helped boost the euro on currency markets. It's up around 0.7% to trade above $1.16 as we see here. The summit in Brussels, however, continuing on Friday, which promises some of the most contentious economic negotiations yet, as proposals for a common eurozone budget are dividing member states. Anke Uhle reports.
After 4 hours of talks with Emmanuel Macron, on June 19th, German Chancellor Angela Merkel finally agreed to France's demands for a common eurozone budget. In a significant symbolic step, Merkel accepted the principle of a budget for the 19-member bloc, funded with permanent tax resources, and designed to help economies converge and be more competitive. The deadline for establishing the budget, 2021.
If a crisis hits one of the Eurozone's member states, could be Greece, Italy, Spain, even France, this budget will allow us to stabilise and absorb the shock of crisis.
Berlin fears the idea of fiscal transfers from economically strong countries to weaker ones.
There's always been this idea that Germany would end up paying for everyone, that Germans are very careful with their money, while everyone else spends irresponsibly. And when a problem comes up, the Germans will be asked to pay for it.
Berlin and Paris have agreed to a system where a country could suspend its national contribution to the budget if it needed to use the funds. A Eurozone unemployment insurance fund could also be created. The size of the budget hasn't yet been agreed upon. France wants it to be several points of the Eurozone's GDP, meaning hundreds of billions of euros. But the Germans envisage a much smaller amount. And even if France and Germany do come to an agreement, convincing the other Eurozone members won't be easy. The Netherlands, Ireland, Luxembourg, Belgium, and Austria are all against financing a common budget and have already rejected the idea of a flat tax across the bloc.
Well, that's France 24's Anke Uhle. Time now for a check on the stock markets. Asian indexes mostly on the rise Friday, the last day of the trading quarter. Banking and pharmaceutical shares gaining on the Nikkei. Exporters, however, losing ground. The Nikkei currently just under the flat line. The tech sector leading the Kospi in Seoul. It's up nearly 0.5%. Chinese indexes recovering from recent losses as Beijing loosens restrictions on foreign investment. Trade tensions between the West and China expected to dominate market moves in the third quarter. Earlier, France 24 spoke to Oriana Liza of CMC Markets in Singapore about just that.
I think it's always overshadowing the markets at the moment. I do see some similarities between yourselves over in Europe, but also myself here in Asia. The most recent threats were to the automaker section. To give you an example, BMW, the luxury car maker, generates $8 to $9 million worth of revenue. $8 to $9 billion worth of revenue per year. But I think the bigger play for sort of medium to short-term investors on the trade war front is whether or not the markets will become clever enough or desensitized once a lot of these threatened tariffs actually become imposed.
Donald Trump was in the U.S. state of Wisconsin Thursday to break ground on a new plant being built there for Taiwanese electronics manufacturer Foxconn. The president taking some rhetorical shots at Wisconsin-based motorcycle maker Harley-Davidson, which has announced it's moving some production out of the U.S. in response to tariffs coming as a result of Trump's trade standoff with the EU. Well, the Foxconn plant should provide some 13,000 jobs, though critics say the massive tax breaks given to the company are unfair to Wisconsin taxpayers. Trump taking some credit not just for the jobs, but also touting his protectionist policies in the construction of the plant itself. Here's Trump.
Foxconn has already contracted 27 local Wisconsin companies to begin construction of the main facility. And I'm pleased to report that Foxconn intends to build 100% of the factory with beautiful American concrete and beautiful American steel made right here. So important. Our steel industry, our aluminum industry, our solar panel industry, it's all coming back.
Well, finally, for business, ill-gotten gains seized by governments are frequently put up for auction. But what if the gains belong to the previous government? Well, the impoverished West African nation of Gambia is sticking with the playbook, putting up for sale a bevy of planes and luxury cars accumulated by its previous president, Yahya Jammeh. Jammeh fled into exile last year after refusing to accept his electoral defeat after 2 decades in power marked by rampant corruption. He's suspected of skimming more than $50 million from the state. Well, Gambia hopes to raise around $10 million from the sale to be used for health and education projects.
There is an asset recovery account that is open with the central bank. So any asset that is sold will go to that account. I mean, now it will depend upon government as to how those funds will be used. They could be used to support the budget.
And I'll say it might help the sale maybe if they wash the cars first. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Brian Quinn with the latest business news. Thank you very much.